Happy Monday, everybody. What's happening? Welcome in. My name's Jason Priester, the Clemson Insider. Doing what we do every Monday, gathering here to discuss the week that was in Clemson athletics. Wide open tonight. We can take it anywhere you want to go. If you like, we can go heavy recruiting tonight. 3 commitments in the last week. We had Dabo Sweeney's camp, our high school camp over the past week. Full disclosure from the jump, I wasn't there on Wednesday. Can't talk a lot about what happened on Wednesday, but any other day, we can dive into that. We're going to start out with the commitments. And before we get to that, I want to thank our sponsor over at A-Glass. 2 locations right here in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Those guys can take care of all your auto glass needs. They do replacement, repair. Give them a call today. Either location, you can get yourself a free quote at myaglass.com. Stan, Michael, Ryan, all those guys been in the glass business for a long time. The office manager over there, Chandra, her too. She's been with them a long time, man. One of the best around here, maybe the best. A-Glass for when you need a glass. 3 commitments in the last week. They're coming off the big official visit weekend, which was a week ago now. Probably the most surprising for me, or definitely the most surprising for me, was Leo Delaney. And he was kind of the first one that popped off. Hardrick, he was followed by J.R. Hardrick, and then Carter Scruggs. Both those guys committed. Delaney committed on Tuesday, the other 2 on Wednesday. Hardrick earlier in the day, Scruggs later in the afternoon. Delaney definitely the biggest surprise for me. He's a guy that I probably, at least earlier in the year, man, I thought he was probably heavy lean in Tennessee. And then you start thinking he might be heavy lean in Michigan. In the phone call I had with him on, I think it was Sunday. I can't remember if it was Sunday or Monday. It was the day before he committed publicly. He told me that he always knew it was going to be Clemson, man, and a big part of that was Matt Luke and that line that class of linemen he's put together. There's, with those two additions, there's 6 now. Clemson's done. They're not going to take any more. They had a guy, Fletcher Turk, who was supposed to come in for an official visit next week sometime. He had told me the 16th. I don't know if he just said it wrong, because I've also heard the 19th, but that is not going to happen now. Again, they're full up there. That offensive line, 6 is going to be the number. Probably the strongest group of offensive linemen Clemson's ever signed, assuming they keep them all together, and I have no reason to believe they won't. I just don't see a repeat performance of what we saw in the last class, where a bunch of guys defected and ended up heading elsewhere. I'm not saying you won't have any decommitments. I just don't think you're going to have any kind of mass exodus or anything like that. I think all 6 of these linemen are pretty solidly in. And it's not like they took, 2 or 3 really good guys and 2 or 3 developmental guys. These are all really good linemen. They're all blue chip guys. All of them are ranked 4 stars by at least one service. Most of them are 4 stars at all the services. But going back to Delaney, he was a guy I would not have expected going into the weekend to shut it down this quickly. I figured he'd be one to take all of his visits and then make a decision. He had already set a commitment date. I think it was July the 2nd or something like that. It was early July. I figured he'd definitely be one to kind of ride it out, take his visits, do his due diligence, and then come to a decision. But he told me the official visit weekend sealed the deal for him. No reason to, extend it out any further. J.R. Hardrick's the first defensive end to commit. He's one going into the weekend that I would kind of thought would be a top candidate for shutting it down coming out of the weekend. A guy Clemson hasn't really been in on that long. They just offered him a few weeks ago. He visited campus in the spring. If I'm remembering right, he told me when I talked to him after he got the offer, he had told me he was on taking several recruiting visits, and they just hit Clemson on the way back home, just kind of by chance. And all of a sudden he ends up being a part of the class. He's a long guy. He plays at a small school there in Tennessee. I want to say it's a 1A school. Don't hold me to that, but I want to say it's a 1A school. I talked to somebody up there this weekend who they really like him, man. Nobody's claiming he's going to come in, start day one or anything like that, but they think he's got the tools to develop into a very solid player. Now you got to add to that. You got Dre Quinn, who was at the big official visit weekend, and you got Bryce Perry Wright, who's kind of listed as a defensive lineman by the recruiting services, but it's starting to sound like he's probably a defensive end take for Clemson, at least for right now, and he's a guy that absolutely can do it. He's going to announce on July 4th after he finishes up with all his visits, and with Perry Wright, if you kind of follow the visits, he's a guy that's been to Clemson more than anywhere else. We'll see on Dre Quinn. He's been kind of hard to get a good read on for me, but he could, a position that's kind of been a concern for all since the turn of the calendar, even going back before that. You might end up with a pretty solid class of defensive ends. Just got to wait and see how it plays out. Then Carter Scruggs, he's another one that I kind of thought would take all of his visits. Has kind of been in his, he's a guy he's taken a lot of visits. Figured he'd go ahead and take all of them, and then announce sometime in July. But once Delaney jumps on board, there's only one more spot left. You better jump on it and grab it, because had he not done that and taken the rest of his visits and waited till July, that spot very likely was going to be filled. Probably would have already been filled by now. But there it is. You have your 6 offensive linemen. I think it's probably the best group of offensive linemen Clemson's ever signed in a recruiting class. Just can't say enough about what Matt Luke's done in the short amount of time that he has been at Clemson. Heck, one of the opening 27 offers goes out to his son. He was at camp the other day. But I've seen a lot of the word nepotism thrown around some since he got that offer, man. But number one, the dude can play. Number two, why wouldn't you do anything you can to keep that guy around, as long as possible, even if he can't play, for the sake of discussion, I absolutely believe you're going to see like I thought we saw a big improvement in Clemson's offensive line from, last year as opposed to what it was a year before. There was still a lot of room for improvement, but I thought we saw a lot of signs of progress. I think they're in for a big jump this year. They've been under him a year now. I mean, it's everybody knows what to expect, and they're used to his style and knows what is expected of those guys or what he expects of those guys. I think that's going to be a strength on this offense this year, seeing as you get 4 starters back. And then, when you look what they added in this class, and I still like a couple of, several of the guys they got in the last class, even though it was a job to get it done, and they ended up having to take some guys that were a little lower on the board. I think they signed a few solid guys. So you got to think when you start looking toward the future, man, you got to like what you see with the offensive line. 2027 offers started going out over the weekend. Really the biggest thing, or at least that I've seen anyway, is who was going to get that first quarterback offer. Clemson waited until they got all those guys into camp this week. You had Trent Seaborn come in, a 4-star kid out of Alabama, a 4-star kid, Keegan Croucher, came in and through this week. No, I'm forgetting somebody, but then you had the 4-star kid out of Louisiana, Peyton Houston, came in and threw yesterday. And to me, Houston and Seaborn were the 2 best that I saw throw. And I spent a lot of time Saturday watching Seaborn throw, and I spent a lot of time yesterday watching Houston throw. They were both pretty impressive, particularly when it comes to the accuracy. Both guys had the coaches reacting behind them when they were making some of their throws. Didn't think Houston got a whole lot of help from some of the receivers he was throwing to yesterday. But, you're working with all kind of talent levels at a camp like that, so that some of that's kind of to be expected. But, man, all his throws were right on the money and right where they were supposed to be. By the time I walked out of there yesterday, I had kind of already – matter of fact, I had a fairly lengthy conversation with his dad, and I told his dad on the way out that I thought he was going to be one of the one or 2 guys that walk away with offers this weekend. The first day Elijah Haven threw, I knew I was forgetting with somebody, another big time quarterback in the 27 class. But I didn't watch him as much as I did the other 2. I watched him a little bit, but I really watched the other 2 because I thought those were probably the top 2 candidates. Croucher's probably had the strongest arm of all of them. But, man, the accuracy with those other 2, with Seaborn and Houston. And Seaborn was he's not the biggest guy. He's listed at 6 foot, I think. He's a little smaller than I was expecting, but, man, he makes all the throws. He makes them look easy. Moves. He's got really good footwork. Same with Houston. Anyways, going back to the conversation I was having with his daddy, they had all kind of travel issues getting into Clemson Saturday night. They didn't get into their motel until about 3 a.m. So when we get there yesterday morning, we're looking for him, and there's nobody. He's not there. We assume he's not there because nobody had saw him. Turns out he was a little bit late because when they did get up yesterday, they had to go out and rent a rental car, drive from Greenville to Clemson, so he's a tad late getting there, just a few minutes, not much. And his dad was telling me, he had only been throwing a few minutes when I first approached his daddy, and I was telling him how impressed I was with some of his throws, and his daddy's like, well, let him get warmed up. We're going to see something. And we did, man. He put on a show, put on an absolute show. He's going to go throw for, if I'm remembering right, I think his daddy told me he's going to go throw for Lincoln Riley at Southern Cal one day this week. Can't remember what day it was. And also told me they had just visited Oklahoma. But after talking with his daddy for a few minutes, a month ago, I might would have thought this was a recruitment that Clemson probably didn't have much of a shot to win. I am totally convinced otherwise now. He visited for the underclass experience back in March. Dad came with him. And Dad told me he comes into that visit thinking, I don't know how Clemson and Dabo is going to compete in this new era, because they hear all the narratives out there. They see all the defections from the last class. And then Dabo gets in front of all the recruits' parents and gives them, the spiel about, this is who we are. This is why we do it the way we do it. These are the results. And Dad's blown away so much so that he gets the wife to come back with him this time, Houston's mom, so she can hear it and see it and feel all that stuff for herself. Then you see that Bible verse he posted when he got his, I don't know, man, those two, Houston and Clemson, seemed like a very good potential match, man. We'll have to see where it goes, because it's really just getting started. And a bunch of the big boy schools are after him, but I do think Clemson's got a legit shot to land this kid. For me, the question becomes, do they just, zero in on him for a little while, or do they target a second guy and offer two and say first come, first serve? I know I talked to Seaborn on the phone for a little bit last night, and the staff told him when they left Saturday, they were going to meet and discuss and decide the guys they wanted to offer, and they'd be back in touch this week. So we'll see where that goes. Anything else, drop it in the comments and we shall jump on it. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but if you drop something in the comments, you have to give me a little bit, because I kind of take them as they come, one by one. And the older guy, I start at the top with the very first, so it might take me a little bit to get to yours, just because I don't get to it as soon as you post it. Don't mean I won't after it's posted. Sometimes it takes me about 15, 20 minutes, so you have to have a little patience with me. And no, that don't even apply this week. So with that being said, let's jump into it. My man here agrees with what I say. Got to be the best O-line 2026. Oh, he's kind of saying something a little bit different. Yeah, I think I'm saying the best in program history. But yeah, if you go look, it's an easy argument to make that this is the best class of offensive linemen in the country. It's an easy argument to make. You start with the first kid who committed late last year, and I've been saying his name wrong ever since he committed. It's not Braden Wimes, it's Braden Wilmus. He was at camp the first day. His younger brother worked out. He's got a younger brother that's a 2028 offensive lineman. I got a chance to speak with his mom, and I learned that Dad been saying his name all wrong. But it kind of started with him. Then you go to the elite retreat and get those guys, Adam Guthrie, Grant Wise, Chance Barkley. Barkley's another guy who came and worked out at camp last year, got his offer after working out at camp. And I remember talking to him on the phone and thinking to myself, yeah, this is probably a guy that's going to matriculate somewhere else. It just goes to show, man, you just don't ever know how one's going to play out. He jumps on board, and then you're still looking to add two more, and you get the two that just committed, Carter Scruggs and Leo Delaney, for a total of 6. But yeah, it has to be, the best group of offensive linemen in the country. Not just from, not just because you've got 6. You've got it's not, you've got quality there too, man. Those are all 6 quality offensive linemen. If you just go by 24/7, the Delaney's the highest ranked of them all. I think he's ranked like inside the top 65 or something like that. Then Barkley's pretty highly rated. Scruggs is in the top 200 somewhere. Wise is in the top 250. So I mean, you got quality there to go with some quantity. Yeah, I agree. It's probably the best group of offensive linemen in the country, or I thought it was the last time I looked. I have not looked here in the last few weeks, but I don't know how much has changed. But Matt Luke's definitely doing work. Seeing the 2026 offensive line results and the super quick jump into 27 offer seems like that's the priority position by a mile. Nice change. Yeah, you can. It's pretty obvious. There's a different. There's a new emphasis placed on the offensive line. That's a position where they've kind of if you go back and look last year, and you compare it to the year before, it just I'd have to go back and look at it by numbers, but it just feels like Clemson's offered more kids. They've kind of widened the net a little bit. Here in 2027, just in the last week, they've already offered 6 offensive linemen. The last one went out yesterday to Maxwell Hiller after he worked out at camp. They've offered 4-star Kennedy Brown, 4-star Jimmy Kellis, 4-star Carter Jones, who is a guy I really like. And I'd bet almost anything he ends up being a part of this class at some point or another. Talk about a guy that's kind of blown up in the past few months. And they offered Peyton Miller and Reed Ramsey. Both those guys worked out at camp last week. Yeah, it does seem like there is a new emphasis put on the offensive line since Luke's been around. And it is definitely a refreshing change because I've said it 100 times on here. I think that's just kind of the last hump Clemson's needed to get over. The only thing they haven't really done is put offensive linemen into the league consistently, particularly with, getting drafted in the top half of the draft. And I think that's going to change some with these guys. It won't happen next year. You might have, don't get me wrong. I think some of those guys on the offensive line currently are going to play in the league, but I think that's slowly but surely going to change over the next few years once these guys, kind of grow and get through the program and into the draft. Why no further offers after camp? Just one so far is kind of interesting. Well, I think it kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago about it could be one of two things. Either they're just going to, they rarely offer more than 2 at the time. There have been examples of them offering 1 and going after 1. That's been more the exception rather than the rule, but they've done it. They tend to offer 2 and go that way. I'm not convinced another one's not coming. It's kind of like the Seaborn kid told me last night. They were going to meet as a staff after all the quarterbacks had thrown in front of them and kind of decide which direction they wanted to go. But if you got to watch the Houston kid work out yesterday, it was kind of a no-brainer, man. You knew that one was coming. For me, I like everything about Seaborn, other than the fact that, he looks a little smaller than he's listed, which don't really mean anything. He looks a tad smaller than Taj Boyd, who was not the tallest of quarterbacks. But man, the game's kind of gravitated where these smaller quarterbacks are having a lot of success, man. Matter of fact, I was talking to another fella that works in the media, and he was kind of comparing him to Russell Wilson, the way he throws the ball and stuff. And after I thought about it, I'm not big on player comps, but it was a pretty apt comparison. But I wouldn't be shocked to see one more go out at some point over the next week or so. I wouldn't be overly surprised to see them just go after the Houston kid either, because I think they are legitimately in that one, and what better way to show a kid he's the priority than him being the only offer? I mean, I could absolutely see it going that route. Pump the brakes a bit. Danny almost always had a very good O-line, but too often he had Shane Cameron or some other track lead playing QB. Need playmakers too. I think you've got some playmakers in this offense right now and coming. I am a huge believer in Tate Reynolds, the quarterback in the 26 class. I love all three of those receivers they signed in 26. I don't think there's I think you got playmakers coming to kind of fill in behind Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore and Antonio and that group of guys. Naeem Burrs, man, that guy, he is a burner. Connor Salmon's even faster than he is. And Gordon Sellers kind of gives you that playmaker on the outside, long, a lot of length. I think the offense is going to be in pretty good hands moving forward, personally. Thoughts on getting Darius Gray and Tyler Atkinson? I think Clemson's done at offensive line, so scratch Gray off the list. I would have always had them as a extreme long shot to land him anyways. He went more than a year between visits. They finally got him back on campus for the elite retreat, and he did come back for the official visit weekend. He's a very personable guy. I've had a couple phone conversations with him, man. He's very likable. He's one of those guys that he took 7, 8, 9 official visits, something like that, a bunch of them. He kind of strikes me as this guy that just kind of likes the recruiting process. And he's not ready to shut it down, and Clemson now finds himself full. As far as Atkinson, I can't really give you odds on that or anything. That guy plays everything close to the vest. He does not even announce where he's taking official visits to until a few days before he's going. He was at Clemson last weekend, ended up at Oregon, this weekend. Would fully expect Ohio State and Georgia to get one at some point, but kind of speaking of guys that are hard to get a good read on, it's him. Whether they get him or not, you got to commend Ben Boulware for the job he's done there. Clemson was not even on Tyler Atkinson's radar in January before they got rid of Wes Goodwin. That was, I want to say, that might have been Boulware's first recruiting stop when he went out on the road. Don't hold me to that, but it was definitely one of his first. And he took Mickey Kahn with him, who Atkinson goes to Grayson, where Kahn was the head coach for so long, and took Dabo with him too. That's kind of when they got the door cracked back open. But I mean, you're in it. At this point, that's all you can ask. And he's another guy I would fully expect to make a decision in July. But right now, if I had to guess, and this is just a best guesstimate, I'd say 50-50. That's probably not what you want to hear. But he just doesn't he doesn't give out a lot of hints. He's very well versed, at least in my experience. He's very well versed in how to handle the media and how to talk to them, and knows what to say and what knows not to say. He doesn't really tip his hand very much. Any concerns for defensive end recruiting? Yeah, I've kind of talked a good bit about this over the past few weeks. I definitely think it's the probably the area worth watching the most as we move forward for the rest of this class. If you land Perry Wright and you land Dre Quinn, you're good. But you got to do that first. And I absolutely would call, Clemson probably the front runner to land Perry Wright. Again, like I said earlier, man, he's visited Clemson, more than he has anywhere else. I want to say he was on campus 3 times last year, or I think he visited for 2 games, and he was also in Atlanta for the game against Georgia to start the season as a Clemson recruit, if I'm remembering right. So I mean, it's I've always thought Clemson was probably the leader in the clubhouse for the most part of this thing, but you still gotta get him on board, and it's got to become official. And I don't really have a good read on Dre Quinn, but if you get all 3 of those guys, then you're good to go. If you get 2 of them, that's, and if you get 2 of them and then end up expanding the board and taking a third commitment from somebody else, you have to just judge it based on who that somebody else is. But that's also a spot where you could go back to the portal and add a guy, like a stopgap guy, if you need to, for the 2026 season. I mean, there's a lot of different routes you can go, but yeah, it's probably, of all the positions in 2026, it's definitely the one that most people are watching for sure, just because of the lack of action there for the most part. Let's just be quite honest. It's been that one position in this class where there's just kind of been trudging along with not a lot happening. I mean, you got the Ardrick kid, but he's a 3-star guy. Again, plays at a small school there in Tennessee. There's the diehards that follow recruiting intently. They don't care about a 3-star. Let's be honest. They want those 4 stars and 5 stars. So let's just see what happens with Perry Wright, see what happens with Dre Quinn. You land both those guys, man, and you got a solid class of defensive ends. You land Perry Wright, miss on Quinn. Let's see what happens with who you target after that. Definitely worth keeping one eye on for sure. We're only 2 years removed from a mistake. Focus still needs to be on playmakers. Focus is always on playmakers, I think. I don't, I don't think anybody's ever taken the focus off of that. That you can place a heavier emphasis on offensive line than you have in the past and still have a heavy focus on playmakers. I assume the mistake you're talking about is Uyunglele. I'm not sure. That's a mistake every college in this country would have made, that everybody wanted him. It just kind of is what it is at this point. Nobody's going to have 100% hit rate. Who were the shades? The first pair were from Max Brown. Forgot about him. We might have talked about him last month. No, because he didn't announce until Tuesday. I got all my focus on 26. The first pair that went out on Sunday was Max Brown, because I had 2 different people tell me that he was committing on the spot. And I had a conversation with him. I think it was Sunday. It might have been Monday. Yeah, Monday, the day after he got the offer, because I threw those out right after he got offered. And I had a conversation with him Monday, the day after he got offered, and he told me that he committed to Boulware when Boulware extended the offer on the phone, and then Dabo called him later that evening, and he committed to Dabo too. So he was on campus Tuesday for camp. Wasn't working out because he's dealing with a little bit of an injury, so he wasn't going to work out. But wanted to go public after he got on campus. The second pair were for J.R. Hardrick. Those went out the next day. Third pair were for Leo Delaney. Fourth pair were for Carter Scruggs. They went out the day of his announcement. So we offered a 2027 QB. I thought they were big on the Seaborn kid. Both those guys killed it, man. You can be big on one guy and be big on another guy too. I thought both of them were extremely good during their workouts. But and I've been big on Seaborn too, man. But I'm telling you, Houston probably had and I'm not saying it was like night and day difference, but probably a little bit better of a workout than Seaborn did. I shouldn't even say it that way. He just looked a tad bit better than Seaborn did. But when you start talking about the differences in these guys, man, it could be just small, minor details. I think Seaborn's got all the tools. The kid's got. I mean, he's got pinpoint accuracy. They have them in one drill where they've got this net set up in the back corner of the end zone, and they kind of have to throw like they would a fade, and it's a big net with like 6, 7, 8 different holes in it, where you throw it into one of those holes, man, and he was routinely putting them in there. And then one of them, man, when he threw one in there, Dabo was watching, man, he kind of jumped up in the air and like, wow. But then when Peyton Houston's there yesterday, man, he's so good that you got Dabo over there, Garrett Riley's over there, Taj Boyd's over there, John Grass is over there, Jordan Sorrells is over there, Kevin Kelly's over there. They're all over there watching, and you can just see Riley's face on a couple of those throws, man. He just starts grinning ear to ear, like, those things where he say, you know it when you see it. You was seeing it. The kid's the real deal, and that's not a knock on Seaborn, because I think he's pretty dang good too. Just look at his offer sheet. That tells you what schools think of him. It's just Clemson's got a different way they go about recruiting, man. If they might decide they only want to offer one, it's hard to argue it being the Houston kid after what I saw this week. Zach Grove's supposed to come in for a visit. Not that I'm aware. If we're talking about the kid that's committed to Tennessee, he just committed to them like 2-3 weeks ago. I'm not aware of any visit. I don't expect. Clemson's got the defensive tackle, the Stancil kid that's coming in for an official visit, like not this weekend, but the next. Outside of that, I don't know of anybody else visiting this month. Camp's over. We'll see if they bring anybody in. They very well could. Some of these kids do unofficials, during summer months. But usually, like say, for example, like if you're a 2026 kid, the chances of you taking an unofficial in the month of June are probably pretty unlikely. So no, I haven't really heard of anything with Groves. Right now, the top two guys are Dre Quinn, and I'm starting to call Perry Wright a defensive end at this point. Peyton Houston looks pretty good. Might not be a dick. I didn't think there was a ton of difference. Yeah, this you're kind of hitting on it here. I didn't think there was a ton of difference, man. I thought they were both extremely sharp. But you got to if you're only going to offer one, and I think that might be very well where this is headed. If you're only going to offer one, you got to pick your horse and ride with him, and just based on what I saw And I'm just a layman. I'm definitely not some expert talent evaluator, but again, you kind of know it when you see it. And I thought I saw it in both those guys, man. But Houston, I don't know. There's just something different, man. He's kind of got that wow factor, that it factor. He just kind of oozes it. There's just something different there. And if you're there watching those two guys work out, you know, you see what they like so much about him. It just jumps out at you. You see it. Why haven't we heard much about Watford? He tore ACL, so he didn't really do anything in the spring. So I would fully expect a red shirt out of him this year. Do we think we'll see much of Pennington this year? I'm gonna say no, just based off past history. You know, I remember when he committed to Clemson, man, I had a long conversation with his head coach, and then I had a long conversation with him. And sometimes you can tell when head coaches are just kind of pining for their guys. And sometimes you can tell they're being genuine and they wholeheartedly believe it. And this guy, man, I can't remember his name now, but he wholeheartedly believed that Pennington was going to come in and he was going to make a pretty quick impact. You know, but he ended up getting hurt, kind of gaining weight. He's really had a bunch of injury problems that have set him back. You know, it's never really been a question about about his ability. It's been kind of his availability. You know, but with 4 or 5 starters coming back and some solid quality guys behind them on the depth chart that probably have as much or more experience than Pennington, I'd probably lean towards no. You know, matter of fact, he was kind of one of the guys that I was halfway thinking could potentially transfer after last season so he could have an opportunity somewhere else, man. But we'll see what happens. You know, I've been wrong many times before, and I'll be wrong many times again. I remember, man, when I used to work a real job, and I'd come home every afternoon, and the wife's watching Dr. Phil, and I can still hear Dr. Phil saying, you know, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So I'm gonna use that here and go with probably not. What am I most excited about in the 26 class so far? Can't you tell them offensive linemen, man? For me, that's kind of the biggest story here in the 26 class, man. What they've done with that offensive line and what Matt Luke's kind of done to, I mean, I guess the best way to put it is kind of transform the mindset in that room. And I think he's done that. You know, outside of that, I really like what they've done at receiver, man. I am really high on Naheem Burrows and Gordon Sellers, man. I really like the Salmon Ken a lot. I think they've put the pieces in place to kind of continue to be successful on the offensive side of the ball. I have to see what they do at running back. They're kind of all in on Jae Lamar at this point. I don't think that's one they're going to win. Stranger things have happened again. I've been wrong before. I just don't get the impression that's one Clemson's going to win. So got to see, you know, who they add at running back. They've kind of been very, very, very particular about who they chase so far. But I like the offensive pieces they put in place in this class, man. I am extremely high on Tate Reynolds. You know, I'm not saying he's going to come in here and be a day one starter. Wouldn't say it's impossible, but, you know, I'm not saying he's going to be. But if you watch his film, man, there is a lot to like about that kid, and I think he's only going to get better. during his senior year. So, but if I had to pick one thing, it's the offensive line. Yes, I watched Haven throw on Tuesday. I didn't spend a ton of time watching him. He's a big kid, man. Kind of like Houston. He's from Louisiana. He looks. I mean, he's probably 6'5". He looks like he weighs about 230 pounds. Man, he's built like a tank. He was good, man. I just, you have to kind of, when you start targeting these guys and decide which ones you're going to pursue, part of the thought process has to be, which guy do we have the best shot at landing? And to me, you probably you're less likely with Haven than you would be with a guy like Houston or Seaborn. As big as he is, man, believe it or not, I don't think he was not the guy I thought had the strongest arm. I would go Keegan Croucher on that one. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about him, man. He's got all the tools, and he is a big old dude, man. He can be used as a battering ram, at the size he is. But again, I just think, a part of the thought process has to be, who do we have the best shot at closing the deal with? How are you feeling about running backs? It's taking a blue chip back high on the priority list for 27, but they've only offered one. It's the in-state kid, and he is a good one. Trey Segura kid out of he's local actually. He's from Burns. He actually worked out on the day I wasn't there, so I didn't get to see him. He's like one of the top 10, 12 backs in the class, in the 27 class. So yeah, I'd say that is something they're looking to do. Another kid that worked out was Andrew Beard. He's another 4-star back. Worked out on the same day as Segura. Take that back. No, Beard worked out on Tuesdays because I got to see him. 2028 running back Michael Martin worked out last week. The day I wasn't there, the guy that works with us, the intern for us, went over there and watched him a little bit, said he was really good. But yeah, right now, Cigar's the guy. We'll see if and when they decide to expand the board, because he's going to be a guy that everybody's after. Baseball portal take. Seems we found a shortstop. Others don't know if they help much. Yeah, I've not. So far, man, none of these guys are really moving the needle much for me. None of them. The Lichtenberger kid obviously is by far my favorite take so far. He's got all the numbers. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. We'll see how those numbers translate to a jump from the Sun Belt to the ACC. He hit 341 last year, so you kind of replace your hole at shortstop and maybe your hole at the top at the leadoff spot. But the rest of the guys, I just don't know, man. The kid from the Clavon kid, just haven't seen enough of him. Didn't play at all at Georgia. I think he had 15 at bats last year. The VZ kid, the one from Alabama, it's a very small sample size, but he couldn't get on the field at Alabama. Got as many walks as he does innings. I want to see the pitching staff addressed. And you got the Hayden Simerson kid. You get him from Catawba. Again, kind of like Richtenberger. He's got the numbers. 3.36 ERA. He led the country with 16 saves. He's got 2 years left, but that's going to be a big jump. And so far, the underclassmen that Bakich has signed out of the portal have not, that the underclassmen he signed that took a big jump up in competition wise, they have not fared well so far, at least in their first years. When he signs a veteran guy, upperclassmen, those guys tend to have some success. So that kind of, you know, is that coincidence? Probably is. I mean, it's still a small sample size. But it's definitely not something I'm overlooking, man. But I still think you need to add a couple more arms. That's kind of what I'm looking for. You know, there's been a lot of guys leave out, guys that probably weren't gonna, you know, have much of a role next year. So it's not like they lost a ton via the portal outside of Ethan Darden. But they need to add a couple more arms, man. And the couple they've added so far don't move the needle at all for me. Again, I understand the Simerson kid was really good at Catawba, but man, we're talking about a jump from Division II to the ACC. That's one. I'm not saying it can't be done or he won't do it. Just one I got to see to believe. I was all in on all those transfers they signed last year, those underclassmen guys, and there were several of them that they needed a year to adjust. So we'll see. I still want to see a couple more pitchers added. Do I think Coach Luke would pursue head coaching opportunities in the future? Oh, I can't answer that. You know, he's already been one at Ole Miss. You know, his family still lives in Georgia, you know, a little bit away. They don't live there in Clemson with him. I just don't know, man. I wish I had a better answer for you on that one. I tend to believe, you know, based on everything I've heard and everything I've seen, and I actually had talked on the phone to his kid the other day after he got the offer from Clemson, man. It just based on everything I see and everything I hear, he's extremely happy in Clemson, more than content. The only person that could really answer that would be him. You know, having already been a head coach and been fired as a head coach, I do feel pretty confident in saying if that is, you know, the path he wants to take in the future, I would have to. I'd wager almost anything on him being very selective, and he wouldn't just take any job. He need to be set up to have some success. But we shall see what the future holds for him. If you're Clemson, you hope he's around for a long time. That kid from Georgia is going to be a dog. Everyone we've taken so far are going to be asked to take on a major role. They're going to have to take on a major role. Just a lot of holes replacing that lineup. You know, maybe VC is a dog. You know, a dog, as you say. Not dog. I mean Clavon, the infielder there from Georgia. He just didn't get on the field much as a freshman. There's something Backett sees in him that he likes. You know, at least with him, you don't have to worry about the jump up, you know, in competition. He's been in the SEC. He's playing. He's already seen that kind of competition as he will in the ACC. With him, that's one you don't have to worry about. Same thing to a degree with VC, although, you know, he's not seen the field much there at Alabama. No, but at least he's been in that environment and he's faced off against that kind of competition. But I think there are still a few more moves to be made, or at least there's a few more that still need to be made. Can't say they will get made, but I know Weidman here. He's asking me about Weidman, Tom Weidman's son. I know Weidman visited over the weekend. He told me he was on campus and he visited. He's a guy, though, you have to wonder about his interest in going. He's draft eligible. You know, he could easily get drafted and decide to go start his professional career now. So I think that's one thing to consider with Wyman. If he returns to college baseball, I lean towards thinking it'll be at Clemson. But I think that's a big if at this point. We just got to see what happens with him in the draft. Look at there. I answered that one. I answered a couple in one shot there. What's the QB situation look like in 20? I'm assuming you're asking me what's going to happen after Cade leaves. The job's going to be open. I'm just kidding, man. Obviously, Chris Vezina is who you want. You want him to be able to slide in and take over that role. He'll have 2 years of eligibility left. Tate Reynolds, who is the 2026 signee, and Brock Bradley. Let's don't leave him out of the conversation, but I think he's a guy that's going to need some development, and Tate very well might need some too. But Tate has been adamant that he's going to play baseball at least for 1 year. If he plays baseball for once, if he's I just think that when that job's open and Reynolds comes in here and he's or at least he's got interest in winning that job, he needs to be on campus or at every spring practice, fully locked in on football, not dividing time between the two. But obviously, best case scenario, Vezina is where you want him to be, and he's ready to take over that role. I mean, he will have been kind of very patiently waiting his turn for 3 years. He's absolutely going to get first crack at it. We know Dabo has a lot of loyalty to some of these guys, and this guy's been extremely loyal to Clemson and Dabo in a very unloyal world of college football right now. He's kind of the rare breed, as I like to call him, because there aren't many quarterbacks willing to sit more than a year now. If they're not playing within a year, man, they're up and on to the next spot. Vezina's he's gonna, by the time that rolls around, man, he'll have been waiting 3 years. He's already been here too. And we haven't seen a lot of him, so we don't know what he's going to look like. But I was pleased with what I saw from him in the spring game. I thought he looked far more polished than he did in the spring game last year. And you hope he keeps progressing. And you hope there's no need to have a quarterback battle. They've they will, by then, they will have had 3 years to get him ready. And I am a big believer in Garrett Riley, man. I think he's got a pretty good track record with quarterbacks. I think they'll have him ready. I think he'll be the guy. What's the word on Jae Lamar? Yeah, I don't have high hopes on this one, man. We'll see. I got a source that's pretty close to Jay. I know he thoroughly enjoyed his official visit, but he's not ready to shut it down. He's gonna follow through. Georgia is heavily pursuing him. It's kind of, if I had to guess right now, it's probably Georgia, Clemson at the top of the list, maybe one other school. But as my source told me, Clemson's 100% in it. But I just don't have a very good feeling on that one. I think they're going to have to go in a different direction at some point. But we'll see, man. He's he's still got a couple more visits to take. We'll see what happens. Again, once these kids get to this point in their recruitment, a lot of them don't like to, drop hints. They want to keep that element of surprise. And this could be, the guy who's been a very good source for me with Jae Lamar, since the beginning of the year. He could be helping Jay do that by being very vague in some of his descriptions and stuff. That's just kind of part of the game. But I would probably put Clemson finishing as the runner-up in this one. But as I like to say, stranger things have happened. Glad they offered a punter finally, from what I've read. He's a good one. Enjoyed kicking in the Valley. We are in the hat with quite a few other. I don't even know the punter they just offered's name. So I know they just added a punter. I want to say he's somebody's younger brother that's already on the team. So there will be another punter on the roster come fall camp. I'm not sure if that's who you're talking about here or not, because I don't. He's already on the roster, so I mean it's. But they did. I think they did offer a punter too, and it's time to offer one though, because you got Jack Smith, who's been around forever. He won't be around much longer. It's time to bring in one, a young one. Did Tate Reynolds show similar accuracy? Oh man, I thought Tate killed it at camp last year. Maybe not quite as accurate as Houston, but a year ago Reynolds wasn't quite as polished as Houston. He was. I'm trying to remember what he told me when we were talking about it, but he's not a guy that's devoted his whole life to football, man. He's kind of just, and this was a year ago when he was telling me this, he hadn't long done that, if I'm remembering right, and he had not long decided that football was the path he wanted to take. So he's kind of going all in on, even though he still does play baseball, he kind of realized football was the way he wanted to go. But we saw him take a big jump as a junior. I expect him to take another one, man. I wouldn't be so shocked if most of the services didn't have him ranked as a top 10 quarterback before the end of it. He's made the Elite 11. He's an Elite 11 finalist. He's killed it at some of these other camps. He's had a really good summer, man, after having a really good junior season. I'm a big believer in that guy. Not doubting the Houston kid, just saw a pic of him with Dabo, and they are the same height. The game's kind of gravitated towards smaller quarterbacks, and Trevor Lawrence, man, he's much taller than pretty much every quarterback that's come through in the Dabo era. I mean, compare him to Deshaun, compare him to Taj. Houston to me is kind of about the same height as Taj Boyd, maybe. 6'1", and he's only just starting his junior year of high school. He's probably going to grow a little bit still. Probably not a lot height wise, maybe a little bit, but he's still his body's still physically developing. I kind of used to be in that boat where I put a lot of emphasis on how tall a quarterback was, because you want to, they always made such a big deal of him seeing over the line and stuff. Man, we've had so many guys that are 6'1", come in and kind of prove all those narratives wrong. This dude was a stud, man, absolute stud. He's there's a handful of quarterbacks that have come through there in the past couple of years that I just thought were studs and absolutely killed it. And he's right up there with the best of them, man. I mean, he's got the old skill set. He's got it all, except the height. If you like him 6'5". Chances to land Darius Gray and Devin Fitzgerald. None with Gray. We'll see on Fitzgerald. From my understanding, Devin Fitzgerald's the son of Larry Fitzgerald, the former NFL standout who was so good in the NFL for so many years. I think this is kind of probably coming down to Clemson and Notre Dame, but I think this official visit really resonated with Dad, and that's a big part of this thing, man. And Dabo's culture kind of resonates with a lot of those guys that played in the NFL. Look at Braden Jacobs. Excuse me. I remember his dad, tweeting out something on Twitter. I don't remember when it was, maybe late last year, talking about how Braden could have went somewhere else and made so much more money, or been paid $1 million as a freshman. I can't remember what it said exactly, but basically he could have made more money as a freshman somewhere else and a lot more than he would at Clemson. And the point was kind of, that they weren't just there for the money. It was for the culture. And, all the stuff Dabo believes in, growing them as a football player and as a man, and the grades and the academics and, the faith and all of those things combined. And that kind of stuff resonates with a lot of these guys, man. We'll see what happens. I would probably still give a slight edge to Notre Dame. It's Notre Dame. But I do think Dabo and the culture made an impression on the elder Fitzgerald. Have a chance at getting a high quality punter. Yeah, Clemson's added a punter, and I can't even remember his name. I had totally forgotten about that until somebody mentioned it a minute ago, but I want to say he's the brother of somebody on the team. Don't hold me to that, but I want to say he is. But to your point, yeah, Clemson could have went out and got a punter at any time they wanted to. And they've done that now, so there'll be another one in that room come fall camp. I wish I could tell you more about him, but I totally forgot his name. I don't really track the specialist that much. Thoughts on complaints on visitors' pen? I thought the West Virginia coach came off as a little whiny, personally. I am a little bit older, so I get it. My views aren't going to be the same as a lot of people younger than me, but I think heckling is a big part of baseball. If you can't take the heckling, you're in the wrong sport. I kind of like the setup. If they want to move it back a little, just to be sure, I'm good with that. But I don't want to see them make some wholesale changes because a coach complained. That was kind of the intent behind doing it that way. I can tell you this. If you were watching on television and saw the guy from the NCAA down there, that was not a Clemson person. That was an NCAA rep down there talking to the fans. That was initiated by West Virginia. He didn't just come up and do that on his own. I got to be careful what I say here, but no, I don't want to see some wholesale changes. I don't think you should be so close to where you can reach through the net and touch somebody. I don't think they are, though. I don't think they are that close. And if it gets to the point where you have somebody throw a drink at a guy or something, throw them out. Ban them for life. Don't let them come back. I don't see a whole lot of difference between the way Clemson does theirs I mean, they're not set up the same, but if you go to Coastal, the way their bullpen's set up, there's like a walkway above it. You're sitting there looking right down into it, man. You can talk to those guys. I mean, you can throw stuff at them if you wanted to. You could, cuss at them, do whatever. Um, but I kind of like the setup. I hope they don't mess with it. If you want to move it back a few inches just to be on the safe side, so be it. But I hope they don't make some wholesale changes. Now, as for the music, I've heard some complaints, not a ton. I get why Clemson does it. It's a older, more laid back crowd at Doug Kingsmore, and they're trying to pump some energy into that place. I've been to a lot of college baseball stadiums over the past few years, a lot. Now, during a regional, you get a lot of energy in there, and it's loud. Same thing if you're playing Georgia in a midweek game or when South Carolina's in town. But pretty much any other time, it's just the crowd's kind of meh. There's not a lot of energy in that place most weekends. Again, it's an older crowd, so they're a little more laid back. It's totally understandable. So, but at the same time, I understand why Clemson likes to pump the music in, make it more like. This is one point I do agree with the West Virginia coach. It's more like a minor league atmosphere in that regard. But I think that's just the administration wanting to pump some energy into that place. It doesn't really bother me one way or the other. As a traditionalist, I would probably prefer to cut down on the music a little bit. But again, at the same time, I don't have this big, huge problem with it. I understand why they do it. You go to a game at Founders Park, when South Carolina was good, not when Clemson's playing them, but just a regular weekend series against, Mississippi State or Florida or somebody, man, that you can feel the electricity in there most time. It's not like that at Doug Kingsmore, man. And again, I just think it's because most of the crowds, a little bit older and it's more of a relaxed environment. Tate Reynolds is not a pitcher. There it is. It's Ian Reed's brother. That's the punter. I knew it was somebody's brother. I just couldn't remember who. Do I like Houston or Tate more? I think if you go back a year ago to when Tate was heading into his junior season and compare him to Peyton right now, Peyton's more polished. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, one of them has, been playing quarterback and dedicated a lot of time and effort into being the best that he can be at that position. Reynolds has devoted a lot of his life to playing two sports. And if I'm remembering right, for a while, a lot of the emphasis was on baseball because he's a really good baseball player too. He might be a major league draft prospect when he comes out. We'll see. But I think it's only been in the last few years where he's really kind of turned that attention more so to football. But I think they're two different kind of quarterbacks, to be honest, and it's a little like comparing apples to oranges. If we're just strictly talking, right now, arm talent, who's more accurate is probably Houston. But if you're talking about, some of the intangible stuff, there's a lot of things to like about Tate too. I mean, I like both those guys. I don't, I would tell you Houston's more polished, but I'd expect him to be at this point. I mean, I think I think Houston is one of the best quarterbacks in the 27 class right now as a junior. I wouldn't have said that about Reynolds, going into his junior year. Yeah, I'm gonna take you guys' words on the punters here. I told myself I wasn't putting a lot of stock in the specialists anymore. After the long snapper decommitted from Clemson and signed with Florida State, and while I totally understand why he did it, perfectly valid reason, it just kind of soured me on specialist stuff, and I just don't follow it that closely anymore. So there you go. Here's the punter everybody was talking about, Mikey Bukakis. No, McCune. I'm talking about Ian Reed's little brother. McCune's already been there. How's the lawnmower holding this year? It's holding up well, but when I got home from my week-long trip to Clemson, or 10-day trip to Clemson, I got home yesterday, come inside. I didn't ever really go back outside. First thing I do is go outside this morning, let my dog out, and somebody's broke my shop door, the bay door on my shop. They were putting stuff in there while I was gone, and the bay door on my shop's broke. So my shop's not doing well. My lawnmower's holding up. I do need to replace the blade. You referred to Tate as a Riley kind of QB, i.e. fit for it. Yeah, I think Houston definitely for sure, man. But I think Reynolds is too. Don't get me wrong. No, I just think one's more polished than the other. I think a lot of that's got to do with Houston being a quarterback all of his life too. I'm I can be in love with Houston and that not change how high I am on Reynolds. I'll say this: if Clemson were to land Peyton Houston, when it comes and Vizina wins that job in 26, when it comes time and you got Tate Reynolds and Peyton Houston on the roster, when it comes time for that quarterback battle, that would be fun. That would be fun. But no, Houston his workout yesterday blew me away, man. Just blew me away. Again, he's got that it factor, but I think Tate's got that it factor too. He's just not as polished of a product yet. We'll see where he is a year from now after he plays his freshman season. His senior season in high school. But Houston's a very polished product at this point in his career already. Breakout player this season, give me Gideon Davidson, man. I've been riding that horse, and I'm going to keep riding it. I expect Adam Randall probably run out there first against LSU, but I don't know how long he's going to be able to hold the freshman off, man. I just think he's going to have a big freshman season, and I think TJ Moore is going to explode as a sophomore and become a household name. So those are two guys right there. And somebody is asking me about softball recruiting. Yeah, I just don't cover a lot of softball, man. Will handles that, and Ashby handles that. I cover so much baseball; it's hard to do both. So I can't really give you any kind of softball recruiting update. I don't even follow baseball recruiting much anymore. But I'll say this: the foundation that Rittman has in place there, they are set up to have success for the next several years. this was by all accounts supposed to be a rebuild season, and he makes it to the Supers, and really probably should have not. They should have beat Texas, man. It was right there for them. They should have beat them. Didn't take advantage of the opportunity, and good teams, when you don't take advantage of that opportunity, man, good teams make you pay, and that's what Texas did. That team's going to be in Oklahoma City sooner rather than later. I 100% believe that. I just can't tell you about the incoming class. What type of season will Juju Preston have? A redshirt season. He was supposed to be an early enrollee, but for whatever reason, I don't know the reasoning behind it. He did not end up enrolling early, didn't go through spring practice. He missed several games last year because he had an eligibility issue after he transferred schools in the offseason. So, and he's a guy that's going to need a year in the weight room, man. He's thin as a rail. He's gonna need a year in the weight room and the power hour and all that stuff. He's gonna redshirt. Is Azuma made an odd man out? I don't think so. Adam Randall's a senior. This is gonna be his last year, no matter what. We're still Azuma may still a redshirt. He's only gonna be a redshirt freshman. I like the idea of Gideon and Easy, kind of tag teaming that thing. Maybe not this year, but you got to keep him in the fold. Don't get me wrong, but I think we'll see a little bit more of Easy this year, and I think he'll be ready to rock by 2027. And I think they give you a really good 1-2 combination if you can kind of keep them both in the fold, obviously. Another portal window before, not for football, no. The spring window's the last one. Haven't touched on the settlement. Well, it's been finalized. There ain't really a whole lot to say. We already know what's in it. There ain't a whole lot of breaking down to do on that we've not already done. Do I expect anything from Tink? Again, this is another guy who still underclassman, still kind of trying to find his way. He worked out at receiver and corner this year. I kind of wish they'd pick a spot and put him there. I understand why they did it the way they did it with some injuries and stuff and trying to create some depth. But, the quicker you decide on one spot for him, the better it'll be for him. I think if he's going to make an impact, it's going to be a corner. Doubt it'll be this year, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, baseball is going to go to 34 scholarships, fully funded. Football will be at 105, fully funded. And, there's been this narrative that there's no more walk-ons. You can still have walk-ons. You can't go over 105. You can choose to give out only 90 full scholarships and have 15 walk-ons. That's up to you. And if I've read it right, the walk-ons currently on rosters can't be cut. They have to, so you'll see some teams probably over 105, at first, because those guys are grandfathered in. That's the way I understood it when I read it. But, and if I'm understanding it right, you won't have to cut a bunch of guys right now, but the year after, 2 years after that, you'll have the rosters will actually be smaller, because while football is at 85 scholarships, you could have as many walk-ons as you wanted. I want to say Clemson's football roster had over 140 dudes on it last year. Baseball had over 40. In 20, I don't know if that was this year or the year before last. Can't remember which roster I counted, but it was over 40. So the rosters will be smaller. Basketball goes to 15. But yeah, fully funded scholarships, 34. I do think that helps Clemson. You know, we'll see how NIL goes the rest of the way. You know, anything over $600 is supposed to go through the clearinghouse. And if it's the big question is going to be if a deal gets, is not approved, what happens? Because this clearinghouse doesn't have, I don't think it has the authority to say you can't sign that deal. It can just say we're not approving it. And you can still go out and sign it. Are there going to be any consequences to those kind of things? I lean towards thinking not. There was some news today that there's going to be some private equity firms, starting to back a couple of schools. Didn't say which schools it were. I'm not diving too deep into that. I'm definitely not a private equity expert. Back to the baseball scholarships, though, I do think that's going to help Clemson a lot because, the 11.7 really kind of limited the what they could do scholarship wise. No baseball player at Clemson has been on a full ride. Now you can offer all those guys full rides, but if other schools are still going to have collectives and, use that money to bring in, talent for baseball, some other schools are probably going to give, more rev share money to their baseball programs than Clemson is. Clemson's pretty much the rev share money they'll get for baseball is the scholarships, and that'll be it. So Backett is still going to have to get kind of creative with the money stuff and the NIL stuff. And so I still think they're at a little bit of a disadvantage there, although I do think the 34 scholarships helps. Anybody that listens to Backett speak about, NIL, he speaks about NIL a lot and creating platforms for his players so they can, be or more easily land some of those NIL deals and things. That's why he's asked everybody to follow all his guys on Twitter to grow their brand, which makes them more attractive to some of these local companies and stuff. But yeah, everything will kick in on July the 1st as expected. And probably the biggest thing to come out of that for me, because we pretty much knew all that stuff. Baseball goes to 34, football to 105, basketball to 15, is not having to cut all the walk-ons immediately. Yeah, the NCAA is not, it's a third party that will be, it'll be a third party that kind of oversees the NIL and stuff. But again, when they, kind of decline an offer and say, no, this doesn't get our approval, and the kid goes out and signs it anyway, what's going to happen? I just tend to think nothing is. And if you do try to do something, man, I think there'll be a instant lawsuit, and I think they'll lose. The Supreme Court was they were very clear in their ruling a couple years or several years back about, schools not being able to restrict, what a kid can make financially. I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but that's basically what it said. And I think this is a good step in the right direction, but I don't think this stuff gets fixed until we unionize the players and collect and go to do some collective bargaining. I think that is the only way this happens. Man, we went over again tonight. It's getting to be a weekly occurrence here. I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. I want to thank everybody that tuned in to the baseball show all season long. Had a fun time doing that with Ashby. Once the portal gets, all the portal moves are made here in another week or two, probably bring Ashby on here and we'll talk some baseball portal stuff or Clemson baseball portal stuff, after after we know who everybody that is going to be signed or has been signed. So kind of be on the lookout for that. I want to thank our sponsor again, A Glass. 2 locations right here in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. A Glass, for when you need a glass. They do auto glass repair, replacement, take care of all your needs. Give them a call or look them up and get a free quote online, myaglass.com. Right back here next Monday night, 7 p.m. See you then.